to Vinay. Welcome to our large online audience and our small but important in person. And let's go. I'll try to monitor online and help them to interrupt. Are you okay with questions as we go?
Let's do it. Anytime you want. We'll do some.
Okay. And if they start getting too obstreperous, I'll tell them to pull it down. Okay, let's take it.
All right, let's get started. Okay. So the title of this talk is the COVID-19 pandemic when scientists abandoned science. And I think that's true for many people in this country. So we'll get into that. But first, I thought I'd give you all a little bit of background for maybe a couple of people online who don't know me and the people here in the room who don't know me. I'm a professor in the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics at the University of California, San Francisco. I'm a practicing hematology doctor. You'll find me in clinic every week and working in the hospital a few months a year. I teach several classes in the school, particularly some of the classes in the master's program on publishing and presenting research, on randomized controlled trial design, and in epidemiology on sort of the basics of epidemiology for a medical audience. I'm mostly a researcher, run a laboratory. This is our website, and you can check out the papers that we do. Those papers roughly fall into cancer drug policy. We're very interested in how we approve cancer drugs, how much they cost, and sort of the incentives in that space. Drug approvals more broadly, the FDA standards for drug approvals, and evidence-based medicine, so how we can make better decisions in medical care. And this is a picture of me in clinic, where you'll find me every week, drawn by a visiting student, the artist's rendition. There you have it. All right, so there's two themes to this talk.
Put in a plug for the Sensible Medicine podcast. So I will put in a plug for the Sensible Medicine podcast. Go ahead and offer a better plug.
Well, yeah, so we do a newsletter called Sensible Medicine, and it's myself, Adam Seafood, John Mandrola, and a few other people. It's a newsletter that tries to showcase the range of medical views and debate on a whole bunch of issues. And we have a podcast that comes out about once a week, Sensible Medicine Podcast, and I think it's something that a lot of healthcare people are getting interested in. It's just sort of another medical journal, medical magazine. All right.
Yes. Can you talk a little bit? I'm getting a report of bad sound quality.
Talk louder into this.
Yeah.
Does this microphone pick up?
I hope. No. Well, yes. Now I'm hearing you better. Yeah. Let's
you hear me better, but do they hear me better on this?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Okay, good.
All right, maybe I'll have to hold it. Or maybe I'll put it even closer up there. All right, that's better. Okay, there's two themes to this talk. So one theme is, I think, the theme about the practical matters during the pandemic. On a number of important questions, scientists did not express uncertainty adequately. They did not permit or foster debate. They did not run studies to reduce uncertainty where it was present. And the establishment view, the view that's still perpetuated, I think, largely in legacy media, was incorrect. It was not just incorrect in retrospect, it was incorrect at the time. And people like Dr. Atlas know on many of these issues, Dr. Atlas was one of the few voices on the right side of the issue. This may have occurred because people were fearful. It might have occurred because they lacked principles. It might have occurred because of ignorance. It might have occurred for worse reasons. So we can explore that. I don't have the answer to that question. The second theme of this talk, and the theme that probably will interest this audience the most, is that academic freedom and censorship, I think, are threats to universities and beyond. And I think we've had an erosion of values around academic freedom. And there is increasingly the threat of censorship, both within the university and beyond, in the dissemination of information. We have some active violations of freedom and active censorship. We've got some passive violations. I'll try to get into that. So this will be the end of the talk. I'm going to go through some of these specific examples. But the active ones, I think, are, things that I've experienced, and I think many others have experienced, being disinvited from lectures. So that has happened both external to the university and internally. To have accounts on Twitter or YouTube or Facebook de-throttled, which essentially means that the algorithm will show it to fewer people, despite the fact it's generating large interest. So it is a particular thumb on the scale of the algorithm that will suppress a certain point of view, even if that point of view is gaining traction in sort of the free market of ideas. I've had papers, academic papers, that have been banned from the preprint server. We're going to talk about that. I've not experienced this, but we have done some work researching how Facebook has labeled things misinformation in the process, which is extremely, I think, problematic. And then there's a JAMA paper that actually quotes some of my views on mask mandates, and it is labeled as misinformation, which I think is almost at the level of libel. Then we'll talk about passive, lack of debate, lack of dialogue, lack of encouragement. at university levels. I think we had far too few debates. Yes.
And these actions are by people, not the algorithm.
Which ones? The JAMA paper and the Facebook?
Well, the
Yes.
post banned from preprints.
Yes, that's an action made by people,
Yeah, okay.
human beings.
Can't blame it on the computer.
Can't blame it on the
Good.
computer.
I hope you get into passive too, the self-censorship, that somebody
Yes.
who wants a promotion, get tenure, research funding, kind of knows, don't investigate certain things, don't say certain things, which is, it's harder to measure. People say, oh, well, no one's gotten fired at Stanford. And I go, yeah, well,
Yeah, no one's gotten fired.
they knew not to do things to get fired.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a great example, Iran Ben David, who I think was initially very outspoken with Jay and an author of the Santa Clara study. But unlike Jay and Scott, a little more junior, I think at the time he was assistant or associate professor. And he essentially went from being very outspoken to just absolutely quiet. And Jay has written a very nice piece detailing a series of emails he received from Bob Harrington and others that told him essentially, we don't like what you're saying, and we don't want you to say this. And I can imagine if you get a letter like that from your chair, you're not going to feel comfortable if you're a junior faculty seeking promotion. And that is a type of self-censorship. So I think there is evidence of that even here.
It's also,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm getting ahead of things.
Please.
I'm also interested in government actions. So
Yes.
if you're in medicine, you need grants.
You need
And,
grants.
and I'm aware now that almost all scientific funding comes from the government. So saying things the government doesn't like looks especially dangerous, but I may be.
I completely agree. And then, I mean, the point being made is about grant getting. You have one of the most visible spokespersons of pandemic policy, Anthony Fauci, is also the head of the institute that administers grants to ID doctors. So imagine being an ID doctor critical of this man. You find yourself in an impossible position where you worry whether legitimately or maybe even just in your mind that your grants may be thwarted if you are critical of what he's saying.
Right, and also you saw and I was the economist in the middle of all this with
Yes.
Fauci and Birx and everything, that they would call up the people that they had given grants to and said, you guys need to put out a letter supporting what I'm saying.
Wow.
Right, and so they coordinated, like with, for example, the Wuhan leak paper.
Efforts
Yeah,
to
but
yes.
clearly they used their government power to coerce people, and then now it's been FOIA'd that the people that were coerced into saying that felt really awful about it at
Yes.
times because they thought that they were saying things that were unscientific. But it was an example of what John's saying, that for sure that we have hard evidence that Fauci called up people he had given grants to and made them basically say it's from a pangolin.
Fascinating. And yes, I absolutely agree that type of coercion, and that also coercion has been the basis of the litigation that's in front of the Supreme Court now about government officials telling Twitter what accounts to ban and de-throttle. Okay, what were the issues? Now there's a bunch of pandemic issues that I think we have to touch on very briefly. And I think you've probably already heard Scott talk about this, and John Ioannidis and Jay. And so I'm going to talk about probably the ones that I think that they've probably already talked about lockdown and school closure, I suspect. The ones I'm going to talk about hospital visitor policies, delaying vaccine approval, vaccine mandates, perpetual boosting, and then errors made by the CDC. Maybe I'll do a few of these. Hospital visitor policies. I think that, a very important thing that occurred during the pandemic was extremely draconian visitor policies at hospitals that lasted even beyond vaccination efforts. And we have a systematic review of the evidence to support these policies. This is called the effect of hospital visitor policies on patients, visitors, and healthcare providers from the American Journal of Medicine. Some of the things that actually happened in this country were we prevented both parents from seeing a dying child who's dying of cancer. A child is dying in the hospital of cancer, only one parent can go at a time. This is a policy that's implemented by many, many hospitals in this country. Siblings of a dying child, an 8-year-old child is dying of cancer in the hospital, a 10-year-old sibling cannot see the child before the 8-year-old dies. We prevented children from holding the hand of their dying father or mother. Many older people died without a loved one present. And I think the most important thing about our literature review, there is just no credible evidence that these policies actually slowed the spread of SARS-CoV-2 in hospitals or in communities. These were implemented and carried on for years without very little questioning, very few opportunities to debate them. I don't think there was a single debate at any university about these policies. And there's no evidence that it actually helped us. I think personal protective equipment shortage was a stated reason. We just don't have enough PPE. But no accommodations were ever made for modified PPE, people could have brought, cloth gowns, cloth masks don't work, but cloth gowns might actually work at preventing contact, or other strategies to limit the use of PPE, home PPE, things like that. Or even to allow someone to visit their loved one and then have them immediately go to a hotel room and spend a week there in quarantine. I mean, we tested nothing, no strategy short of just an absolute ban. And to me, this isn't emblematic of scientists not using science. Nobody said, we're going to try to limit the harms of this corrosive policy, which in many ways is fundamentally antithetical to, the human spirit. I mean, I think it's a violation of deep norms in humanity. And no one's trying to mitigate that, to just perpetuate this.
It's symptomatic of the idea that there were costs. The costs were so trivial,
Yes,
we didn't have to worry about it.
yes.
Whether it's economic costs, educational costs, emotional costs, it doesn't make any difference. Irrelevant.
And here, what is the cost? What is the penalty? What a child who grows up doesn't get to see her brother die? I think, what is the cost?
Medical schools never even, do you learn in medical school to think about costs when you make decisions? No, it's ridiculous.
Well, to think about people as humans, not just
Yeah.
as a piece of meat.
Yeah,
But in part, I mean, it's quantitative. If this were Ebola,
yes,
and if these steps could get the reproduction rate from over 1 to under 1,
correct.
maybe. And in fact, one thing I worry about is that if the next one is Ebola or the plague,
Yeah.
we won't take these steps because
Yeah.
actually it would matter.
Right.
So the real problem is just costs and benefits. That these things, this particular disease doesn't kill 30% of the people get it.
Yeah.
These things didn't help stop the spread of that.
Clear that even if it killed 30%, this would work.
No, it doesn't, no, but there's a body
do
of,
things.
I want the guests to speak, but it's known that these strategies do not stop viral respiratory infections. This is known in the pandemic, but it's not a, what if it's higher lethality, what if it's this or that? These things do not work and they are harmful and destructive and kill people. That's fact, that was known for 15 years.
Yeah, I guess,
But I think he can
ask
go ahead.
questions.
well, that's fine. But I think the point I would make, to all these points is that, yes, is it possible that under some circumstances, some policies will help? Yes, but the problem is the people who implemented these policies for years, they never tested it. They never assessed it. Not only that, as Scott makes a good point, all of the pre-existing knowledge suggested that these would be ineffective policies. And then the other thing, you talk about cost, there's huge human cost being paid here, huge moral injury cost, yes.
So I just have to add on the PPE thing that I was in the Oval Office and talking about masks right at the beginning. And Fauci was worried about the PPE shortage, but he said that we should definitely not have a mask mandate. We shouldn't tell anyone to wear masks. I think he was motivated by the PPE shortage, but then he said to Trump, he said, it's because I'm 99% sure this thing passes from person to person by touch. And that if people have masks on, then they're going to touch their face more, and so therefore it's going to spread faster. He said that to the president, and then the president said that at a press conference about why there wasn't a mask mandate. And then for the whole rest of the COVID thing, everybody ridiculed Trump for saying that.
Yeah.
And Fauci did too, even though Fauci was the one who told him.
Yeah, and he said it in 6 minutes.
I think he believed what Scott said, and he was worried about the PPE shortage, and he was willing to lie to the president to achieve his goal of helping with the PPE.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He even said that. That happened.
Yeah, he admitted it.
Ubiquitous and it's not him. All doctors think it's okay to lie.
Yeah,
Well, you're gonna die of
A doctor.
All right, so I think I said
information.
problematic from a moral standpoint, medical standpoint, no evidence was generated. We don't know, if this actually benefited people, but I suspect it didn't from our review. No university or possible held debates on these policies. What does that say about academic freedom when we're literally banning these kinds of very draconian restrictions and no one's debating it? Okay, vaccines. Vaccines, my standpoint, this is a paper that is going to be forthcoming in the journal that's on a preprint server. It's called COVID-19 Vaccines, History of the Pandemic's Great Scientific Success and Flawed Policy Implementation. And the paper basically has a nuanced argument around COVID-19 vaccines. First, that the development of the vaccine itself on this time frame was remarkable. To go from sequencing the virus to a FDA EUA product within a year is a really remarkable time span. I'm confident that the vaccine, particularly dose 1, did lower the risk of death in older people who had not already had the virus. So I do think there is a positive impact from debuting the vaccine among older people or very vulnerable people. And dose 1 probably provided the largest amount of the benefit. Subsequent doses might have provided a little bit more benefit, but small. I think there's approximately zero value to administering the vaccine to someone who had already had and recovered from COVID-19. The government officials say that your antibodies will go up, but that's not the same thing as saying that as a result of that, you're less likely to have bad outcomes. That's sort of a fallacy that they're assuming, and I think that assumption is incorrect. I think there's very little value to more than one dose in young, healthy people who had not had COVID. And now we're at the point where a young, healthy person can be getting 5 doses, 6 doses, an annual dose. And that to me feels like a cash grab from the companies. I think in several populations, it was quickly known that the net effect was harmful. I think dose 2 and beyond in a 20-year-old man is a harmful intervention. The kids vaccine program made little sense. Most kids in this country have gotten COVID-19 at this point. It's like 99%, and very few of them were vaccinated prior to getting COVID-19. Most of them did fine. Perpetual boosters without data is a money-making endeavor. So one thing I think we've forgotten, but in 2020, I like to point out, it was an anti-vax year with a pro-vax finale. These are some actual quotes. Some of the most ardent proponents of like vaccine mandates and the like were quoted as saying the following things prior to the debut of the vaccine when Trump was in office. Decades ago, vaccines developed against another coronavirus increased the risk of the disease caused by the virus. So they actually worried that, quote, don't rush to develop the vaccines. They might actually enhance transmission. Could Trump turn the vaccine into a campaign stunt? Quote, even if a vaccine generates antibodies, it does not prove the vaccine is more effective at preventing infection. It only means that it's more likely that it would be effective. Serious but rare side effects might be missed. This quote was made, and now this is the policy of the annual booster. It's based solely on the fact that it can increase antibodies. So they're saying that antibodies are not good enough. Show them it actually improves clinical outcomes. And now they're saying, well, we'll take antibodies. The rush to create a COVID vaccine may do more harm than good. Many quotes, including hopes from Ken Frazier, raising hopes for a vaccine before end of the year are doing a grave disservice to the public. And past attempts to distribute unlicensed vaccines have often been met, have been unsuccessful and undermine trust. And as a result, public opinion polling over the course of 2020, yes, Scott.
I just want to point out, I'm not sure people understand what you're saying on that slide. The quotes by Offit and Ezekiel
Yes.
delegitimizing the vaccine when it was being produced by the Trump administration
Yes.
were among the strongest advocates for mandating the vaccine
Yes. Yes.
once Biden took over with that vaccine.
Yes. Scott is totally right. The people who, when Trump was in office, the vaccine was the worst thing on earth, unknown safety, it could do all these bad things. These people sound like what anti-vaxxers, they would call them anti-vax, they sound that way. The moment Biden came into office, you were a fool for not taking it. Of course, there's no long-term safety risk. Of course, everyone should take it. We should have a mandate. They did 180-degree flip-flop. The same people, the same quotes. I got quotes from everybody. So I think Scott's point is that there's a deep hypocrisy.
A deep hypocrisy, and that this is one of the causes of the lack of trust in experts.
Yes.
And public health guidance, because it's been shown to be highly political.
Yes, absolutely. And they poisoned, this is Pew opinion polling around getting that vaccine. They poisoned the public support of getting vaccines. And then later they want to put a mandate to increase the uptake of the vaccine that they themselves have poisoned. And they poisoned it because of Trump. And then I'm going to show you more data. Something very bad happened around election day. Undiscussed. Go ahead.
I have a medical question.
Yes.
So I thought it was kind of a miracle, really over a weekend, mRNA vaccine is there. We actually had it, we needed to test it, whatever. But then it turned out it didn't really do that well and it faded and it's not that good against new variants. So why don't we have more and better vaccines? I would have thought with this ability to get a vaccine over a weekend, and now we've had 3-4 years of intense thing, we would have great vaccines that actually work. But we seem to just have this same old thing that kind of halfway works.
Okay, I'm not the expert, but here's how I think about it, John. I think that there's two parts to it. One is this a problem with the mRNA or purified protein or all these vaccines? What they're trying to do is expose your body to something about the virus that you can try to fight against. And then there's issues of the virus. The virus keeps mutating. And I think in the and maybe Scott can comment on this, my understanding of the pre-pandemic understanding of respiratory viruses, we've had colds for, as long as it's been humanity. A pharmaceutical company might have developed a vaccine to reduce your risk of getting the common cold, but their own internal scientists felt that it was unlikely that any vaccine ever developed will be durable because the viruses will always just mutate around whatever they make. And so they hadn't pursued this idea of a single COVID-19 vaccine that will be durable forever, I think is not even possible.
Right. Well, why don't we have one, every 3 weeks that works perfectly against whatever's going on at the time?
Yeah, they probably, they could try to make it faster, I think.
Well, I think there's several issues though. I mean, one is the lethality of the
Yes.
variants
It's
is
so-
low.
yeah.
It's not the 2020 virus. So there's no reason to aggressively block with experimental drugs
I agree with that.
and side effects a virus that is not highly lethal. I mean, you're not trying to block an infection that goes away in 2 days.
We do an annual flu vaccine.
Well, there's a lot of debate now about what the data is on the flu vaccine.
Okay, end of question.
Yes,
It's the
and well, we can
medical
talk about the flu vaccine too, because I agree with Scott on that, but I think the point is that, yes, it's not, I mean, at this point, it's a cold. There's many colds. I'm gonna have a debate in UCSF on December 7th, where I'm gonna argue that if you feel a cold, you shouldn't even test for COVID-19, it's irrelevant. You should stay home if you're sick and go to work if you feel well, that's it, it's back to life.
If an mRNA vaccine could cure the common cold,
Yes,
why are we doing that? I mean,
Exactly.
That's what I'm trying to say.
yeah, but I think the problem is the side effects of,
Because there's side effects. with
yeah,
it.
the side effects are already in order of magnitude.
There's side
beyond
effects.
How bad a cold is.
Can't we sequence one that doesn't have a side effect? Anyway, okay.
There's no
I
such thing as a drug that
think
doesn't have
the
a side
product itself has inherent side effects because the epitope.
I think one thing that we have to understand is we don't really understand the immune system, the simplistic view of the immune system that we used to have when smallpox vaccine came out isn't right.
Yeah, but
So
also
the
that's,
immune
that
system
doesn't
is a very
mean-
complicated system.
Though I was a prime sinner, I'm getting requests online, could we all shut up? and
Yeah.
Give us.
I second that motion.
Okay, so this is what happened around election day. You know, Trump repeatedly said that the vaccine is going to be approved before the election. This is something called O'Brien Fleming stopping boundary. I'm going to explain this, and I think this tells a real story. Okay. When you run a clinical trial, as you're running a randomized clinical trial, at certain time points, you have to look at the data. You stop and look after, say, 32 events. You stop and look after 64 events. You stop and look at 96 events. You have to stop and look at certain times. What do I mean? The Pfizer randomized control trial. They got 20,000 people getting the vaccine, and 20,000 people getting a saltwater injection. And then every time somebody in the study says, I feel unwell, they swab their nose and they test it in a central laboratory for COVID-19. And the primary endpoint of the study is how many times do people have symptomatic, they feel unwell, COVID-19, the swab is positive.
Oh.
That's the study.
We don't just test everybody?
They don't test you if you don't feel unwell.
Wow.
Okay? So they're not looking at asymptomatic transmission. Also, if you feel unwell, but it's not COVID-19, that's not the endpoint either. You have to feel unwell and have the swab positive, okay? Now imagine you're running the study, it's blinded. I don't know which one you got. I'm in the laboratory, you keep mailing me swabs, positive, positive, negative, 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 positive, positive. Finally, I'm getting to 32. When do I decide the first time I look at the data? How do I decide? Statistical plans of clinical trials pre-specify in advance. After so many swabs are in that are positive, we will stop and look at the data. And we will look at this chart, the O'Brien Fleming stopping boundary. The Z-score is a measure of statistical skew. So basically, if you look at 32 events, and those two arms are equal in size, if there's 26 positive swabs in one arm and 6 positive in the other, it looks like something going on. If there's 27 and 5, 28 and 4, looks like something's going on. But if it's 18 and 17, it's like, oh, that's a wash, right? So this is a mathematical test that basically says, as you look at early points in the trial, you need an extremely skewed Z-score. The skew needs to be very different in order to halt the trial. And then along this line, mathematically, it is the same. Like how persuasive a Z-score of -4 is at time point 1 is about as persuasive as a Z-score of -3 at time point 2. You see what I'm saying? As more data.
All I'm saying is.
Okay, you'll understand it. Okay.
Keep going.
Okay. The initial statistical, one doctor's campaign to stop the COVID-19 vaccine before election day, Eric Topol. He's credited, this is actually in the MIT policy review. He's saying, I'm taking credit for slowing the vaccine. Trump keeps saying on TV, the vaccine's gonna come in October. The reason he says it is he knows the first time they look at the data is by their own protocol in Pfizer, it's 32 events. That's Pfizer protocol. But they lobby for Pfizer to drop that analysis because they know 32 events is gonna happen by October. And they moved it from here to here. They moved it to 64 with a protocol amendment. And then they actually delayed, and when they finally ran the first analysis, 2 days after election day, it was 96. What's my point here? There is no mathematical or medical justification to omit that first look at the data. That look was omitted only for political reasons to screw Donald Trump, because they thought if he had debuted the vaccine right before the election, he was gonna win the election. I see because mathematically, it's the same thing. You can look at fewer events, right? But then you have less of a skew. And then here's the other problem. Every time you amend the protocol, you're inflating the alpha error. Pfizer CEO, we didn't delay the vaccine results until after the election because of the election. That's what Borla says. And then the timeline was based on a plan that called for outside panel to take first look at 32 cases, but the companies and FDA later agreed on a protocol change that nearly doubled that number and delayed that review. This is not medically justified. In fact, by doing this, the mere act of switching is a problem because changes to statistical plans inflate alpha error, et cetera. It was only done to screw Trump, to be honest with you, and actually it killed people because it delayed the vaccine by about another month. So I'd say maybe tens of thousands of people died because of the protocol change. And I think nobody talks about this, but it was nakedly political. And they can say that, well, more events is more certainty, but those people who say that, they've forgotten that this whole point of this equation is that these are equally certain things. You accept a different level of scheme. Okay.
Is this I don't know the literature.
Well, it's
I am familiar with
Yeah.
all sequential statistics.
yeah.
Is this based on that or is it some other kind of?
This is just a very basic frequentist statistical. It's a very common basic statistical test. But the principle is very simple. If you have 10,000 cases,
I mean,
But even this, so you're talking about, is the p-value 95% or so, which seems to ignore the issue. If you have a serious epidemic
Yes,
disease
yes.
that is growing exponentially,
yes,
each week that you wait,
yes,
not only do more people die,
Yes.
but it's growing exponentially.
yes,
Time is of the essence.
yes,
So if this really is the bubonic plague,
yes.
waiting until the z-score is 4 rather than 3 basically means you lose the battle.
Okay, you're making a
That's
separate
out of
point.
the
You're making a
consideration.
separate point, which is that we should be able to be persuaded with much weaker evidence. And I agree with you.
Well,
Because
if it's
yeah.
really
Yeah.
if the R is very
Cost of
high
it.
and
Yes,
it's
right.
I don't know about, that's a different point.
That's a different point.
This point is there's a Z-score, there's a stopping rule, and you can stop on the rule,
But
right?
this point is
To
interesting.
say you wanna change the stopping rule based on how bad the epidemic is, I don't know. We have to
well,
think about it.
pre-announce that we're gonna.
I guess one thing is the worse the epidemic is, the faster the cases accrue. So you're going faster. But your point is fair. But I would just say that the point I would make is, as Scott points out, on many of these issues, like the rhetoric before when Trump was in office, vaccines were bad. Okay, they delayed it. They delayed it, and there's letters that circulate. You can get all the signatories. They delayed it, and there is no medical reason to delay it. And I think that is, you talk about they like to talk about vaccine hesitancy on the right, but this was a huge vaccine hesitancy on the left that resulted in deaths. Kids' vaccine should we do? I mean,
Yes.
I was there when it happened.
hello, sir. Kids' vaccine. I think the first thing I'd say is that, quote, this was in May 2021, myself and Steph Barral and Wes Pegden wrote in BMJ, COVID-19 vaccines for children should not get emergency use authorization. I mean, the whole entire regulatory path we're using for COVID-19 vaccines in adults is predicated on the fact that there's an emergency in adults, which I'll concede to them. And you should be willing, as John points out, to accept less stringent evidence in times of crisis when there's massive death toll. But when it comes to children were, as Scott has always said, never disproportionately affected by this virus. It was really on par with seasonal influenza this whole time. Now, if anything, it's far less severe than seasonal influenza for a child. So the use of the emergency use pathway in children, I thought, was always misguided. So we said that. It turns out that the FDA gave Pfizer a very permissive standard for vaccine approval at young ages. For 5 to 11, they initially allowed you to get approval just by proving that when you inject it in a bunch of kids, their antibodies get to a certain level. And they had that authorization. And then to move it to 6 months to 4 years, they gave Pfizer the same opportunity. You give the dose to the kids 6 months to 4 years. If the antibody titers get a certain level, you're going to be able to have the authorization for that vaccine. But that Pfizer trial actually failed. The 2-dose regimen failed to meet the standard. And then they allowed the company to add a 3rd dose to try to boost the antibodies a little bit higher. Again, a huge unprecedented protocol deviation. They should have made the company go back to the starting board, but they wanted to get the vaccine. Then Pfizer confirms the FDA is considering approval. While they're waiting for the 3-dose trial, they actually see in a non-pre-planned analysis of a non-primary endpoint a reduction in symptomatic SARS-CoV-2. Just as they're getting ready to skip EUA on that basis, there's a series of press leaks and speculation, and then they pull the EUA because actually statistically started to drift the other way. It got a little closer together. So they were so eager to approve this, and finally they approved it based on antibodies and these these kids. And here's the point I want to make. Jay tweeted this like this last week, which is seizures and convulsions are found to be an increased risk from both mRNA products. Now, what's my point here? I read this paper, and I am not 100% convinced that the mRNA vaccine increases the risk of seizures in very young children. There's a provocative signal. I'm not sure it's going to hold up in subsequent testing. But what concerns me is the frequency of this signal is roughly 1 in 10,000. The benefit of the vaccinating these very young kids is not in the 1 in 10,000 ballpark. It's, if anything, a 1 in 100,000 or 1 in a million ballpark, if it exists at all. And so here we have a very aggressive campaign to vaccinate the ultra low risk population using an emergency use authorization, not a full approval. And the harm signal could easily be 10 times bigger than any benefit you possibly could have. And it just goes to show they're taking huge gambles in an effort to push this vaccine at very young ages, which I think to some degree, what was the core animating philosophy of Jay's Great Barrington Declaration is that you don't have to go after the young people as much as you have to go after the old people are the ones to protect. But if you have a vaccine program that omits the young people, they've contradicted, their criticism of you. They've conceded the point to you that actually we didn't need to ruin the lives of young people. And so they can't. So they have to keep having the vaccines in young people. I think it's a political calculation. Stop.
Yeah, I think there's another factor that's a sinful black mark on our country within people in this, which is that they know the data that there's minuscule risk for healthy children. The other reason that they are injecting healthy children with an experimental drug with side effects is to shield adults. They are using children as human shields.
Well, they thought
even though it does not
it doesn't shield adults.
Shield adults after say 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That is another motivation here that can't be underemphasized.
But I feel like the shielding effect is their own data shows it's so transient.
No, but I agree, except the own data also shows that children have no significant risk of COVID.
We agree, yeah, I mean, go ahead.
I want to ask about the data on this, the rationale for a vaccine mandate
Yes.
is not that it'll protect you,
Yes.
but that it'll keep you from giving it to someone else.
Yes.
But I think did they ever look at evidence whether, not just whether it stops you from getting it sick, but whether it stops you getting the children? The thing was, we can't let the children get it, even though they're asymptomatic, because then it'll kill all the teachers. I mean, was there, in these trials, was there an effort to see not just to stop you from getting sick, but to stop?
So then here's what I'll say. You're absolutely.
Oh, mandates, sorry.
Mandates are only ethical if there is enough benefit to third parties such that the loss of individual autonomy is warranted. It's not enough to show I benefit you by forcing you, because you're allowed to eat whatever you want and smoke and do whatever you want. I have to prove that forcing you benefits everyone else in this room so much so that I can take away your autonomy. Right. Trials did not require random swabs of a subset of participant contacts. You could have answered. You could have told Pfizer, look, you got 40,000, you got 20,000 people in your study. You take 1,000, 1,000, and in those households, every week, you swab all the people around them. Every week, random swabs of those people, and then prove if there's less contagion. They could have done that. They didn't do that. So they had no evidence of that. That's one. Two, by Provincetown, Massachusetts, which occurred in June 2021, the CDC director in her own FOIA emails acknowledges that vaccinated people, this is going to burn through them. We already have escape. Provincetown was that, the famous sort of festival in the summertime. And they all got sick despite the fact they were all vaccinated. She knew it was going to break through, but then the mandate was only implemented in the fall. Not only had they no evidence that it would have a shielding effect, they had evidence that despite vaccination, you will spread the virus. So by the time the mandate was done and was known they could transmit, and then with infinite rolls of the dice, if you keep living long enough, you're going to get the virus eventually. The other point I'd say is that even assuming the shielding effect, there's researchers who've calculated that you'd have to exclude like 1 to 2,000 people to prevent one transmission episode. Like in other words, that the actual numerical costs of you'd have to exclude so many unvaccinated people to prevent one episode, assuming that it has a durable reduction in transmission, which it does not have. Scott.
I agree with everything you said. I just want to make the point again that it's not ethical, even if you're shielding people, to inject healthy children who do not have a benefit from the drug with a drug that has known side effects. Okay. I'm not sure that's ethical. In fact, the Human Subjects Committee, with an ethicist on board, would not necessarily approve that.
Well, I would say to your point, Scott, that
Smallpox.
most societies and like rubella and pregnant women, but I think most societies have accepted Scott's principle that as a society, we don't put risk on children to protect older people. I think that's sort of a human value.
Differentiate with smallpox. Smallpox protects children.
Yes, it protects everybody.
Like, this is the case where there is no protection for the child.
Yes.
That is where I think
It's
it's
unethical.
unethical.
And
It is
in small
overtly
parts,
unethical.
at a certain threshold, you actually extinguish the virus. You extinguish it.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, one of the questions I think we need
Oh.
to, you guys, why was smallpox eradicated?
What's that?
I mean, there was a big debate when about whether to eradicate smallpox, but there they had huge advantages. One was that you had no animal vectors.
No reservoirs.
No reservoirs at all.
Obviously not the mutant.
You had a fantastic vaccine in terms of, it basically sterilized.
Sterilizing durable immunity.
Yeah, for basically, I think a lifetime.
Lifetime.
Yeah, and then you had, you basically like that, during these mass vaccination campaigns, you only had a few places where you had some outbreaks. And so you could do this like ring vaccination strategy at the end for the most across group people. It like turned out to be in India and Pakistan.
Yeah,
And then now it's gone.
yeah.
But they actually had justified. You look at the documents around whether they were going to whether they were going to actually launch this campaign to eradicate smallpox. They have a cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
Like this like detailed cost benefit analysis of what they were serious people back then.
But Jay, if they really wanted to eradicate SARS-CoV-2, they should have done these things in the trials. They should have
Yeah.
looked for it. They
Absolutely.
intentionally didn't collect the data.
They specifically actually it's even worse for the last thing.
Yes,
In
let's talk about that.
the
Let's talk about
trials,
the last
in
thing.
the trials, they did not. They recruited a bunch of people that already had COVID and recovered.
Yeah,
Then in the safety analysis, they included them in the trials.
but in the efficacy, they dropped them. The key question here is that if many people had and recovered from COVID-19 to this point, by the time vaccines were debuted in January, many people had it. Not everybody, but we were talking tens of millions of Americans. Now the question was, do you treat those Americans differently than any virus in the history of humanity and vaccinate you against something you just recovered from? Right, ridiculous, which we never did for measles, we never did for all these things that you just recovered from and now we vaccinated you against it. Or do you give them credit for having some natural immunity? And of course, Jay was one of the biggest people who said, and Scott, you have to give him credit. But there was an internal vote that, what's his name, Offit has testified that there's an internal vote by Biden administration to give no credit, 3-2 vote, Offit was in the dissent, no credit to prior infection, which basically meant that by the time they had the mandate, you're mandating the vaccine for a 20-year-old man who already had COVID, has nothing to gain from the vaccine. And here's what I want to show you. We have an analysis, this paper called COVID-19 Vaccines Boosters for Young Adults, a Risk-Benefit Assessment and Ethical Analysis of the Mandates of Universities, where we show mathematically that the hospitalizations prevented with boosters is this tiny bar, and then the rates of side effects, grade 3 or more side effects, keeping you at home for a day are this bar, and myopericarditis already dwarfs hospitalizations. In other words, it is a net harmful intervention to boost adolescent men. These are not even the ones who've had COVID. Just to boost them is harmful, and yet universities force that harm upon them, which is a terrible thing.
I mean, I think those are gonna be lawsuits down to that bottom stuff. There's gonna be like young men that got myocarditis, hospitalized or dead from it. University's gonna pay for that.
I wish they could, I wish they would be litigated.
Because they're not a pharmaceutical company, we don't have the shield, there's no liability shield.
Yeah, it
University
should be
doesn't
litigated.
mandate
And as we learned that the myocarditis is not
Sure.
it's not benign in everybody. There's gonna be some people with scarring. This is Andrew cardiologist. I can't say who he is, but he's he works in the pharmaceutical industry. He develops vaccines. He's an insider in the industry. He says, quote, how ironic is it that the largely fake COVID myocarditis is being supplanted by the likely real COVID vaccine myocarditis? And Twitter says, quote, this tweet is misleading. Find out why. He's labeled on Twitter. He was 100% correct. He's the expert in drug development. Who is it in Twitter labeling? This was before Elon took over. The old regime, Twitter 1.0.
Well, it's 2021, it's quite likely that there was a government source that was
Yes.
pressuring Twitter to do that.
In fact, government may have even flagged that tweet and mislabeled this specific tweet. Okay, we have this review of myocarditis in young men, and basically the gist of our thing is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 stratifiers. Sometimes people say, oh, but COVID-19 has more inflammation of the heart than the vaccine. But what they typically mean is we're going to include 20-year-old men and 80-year-old women, and we're going to look at all ages. And if you look at all ages with no stratifiers, rates of myocarditis are very low. But if you start to look at one stratifier, like, oh, let's just look by age, or two stratifiers, let's look by men and Moderna, or three stratifiers, men, Pfizer, and age groups, or four stratifiers, men, age groups, and dose 1, dose 2, you can see as you hone in on the population, young men getting dose 2 of the mRNA products, myocarditis rates balloon upward. And just a classic strategy to not show the harm of this product is just to look at the whole population. Whereas we know it's a problem that affects adolescent and young men, and particularly dose 2 and particularly Moderna, you know? And so that's what we proved in this paper, that many people are out there, the quote unquote fact checkers, saying that myocarditis is not an issue, but they're using data over here, not data over here.
The other thing about this is the vaccine doesn't stop you from getting the disease. So the relevant comparison isn't whether COVID gives you myocarditis versus whether the vaccine gives you myocarditis.
All roads lead to COVID.
Right, so right, exactly. So the question is there any marginal reduction in the rate of myocarditis when you get COVID because you were previously vaccinated? That's the question. And
Yes.
There's no evidence that that's true.
Correct. So Jay's point is like, if you get dose 1, dose 2, dose 3, then COVID, you have a myocarditis risk, 3 of the shot and a COVID myocarditis risk. And if you just get COVID, you have a myocarditis risk from COVID. So you have to look at the cumulative myocarditis risk across the whole course. I agree with you. That's another miscalculation of these things. That's an excellent point. Okay, should we talk about masking for a minute? And we can talk about
Go
other
for
things. Okay, I mean, you know, I don't know what to say. The United States went beyond Europe and CDC. Went beyond Europe. The CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended that 2-year-olds wear cloth masks in daycare for 10 hours a day, except for the time they nap, where they all nap, they take it all off. I mean, you know, you don't even have to be a scientist to know that this is stupid. And I think naturally the public would be angry, some members of the public, they take it off for naps. As Scott always said from the get-go, I mean, I think of all the things that angered the people the most, Scott, it was probably your comments about masking, because masks are a religious symbol. I mean, it had a certain protective quality. I mean, if you're really scared, it's a visible symbol of our allegiance to the cause, our devotion to Lord Fauci.
I think that there's another more charitable explanation, if I can interrupt,
Please.
because some of my friends who I was talking to when I was in Washington before I posted that tweet, because the data showed it was already known, masks don't work, period, and surgical masks do not work for this infection that was known. I was told, don't do that, because people, it's not that it's religious or whatever, it was simply that people wanted to have something that they thought they could do to control this.
Right.
And when I said that you can't control it with that, that is a very frightening thought, because there was nothing else in people's minds. So I'm just being charitable here. There's a
all the issues.
There's a psychological need
If
to
you want to
feel
just
that-
do something, it's a religious thing, not a religious in terms of thing. You want to know you could do something, there's nothing you can do, so let's put the voodoo doll and put it down. And it's so unscientific. If people want to have voodoo dolls.
What I'm saying,
Incense,
what
the candles, they're
Yes.
we've always done this.
Yes,
We've-
but
But finally,
Polish-
government didn't say it was science.
the
That's
CDC itself said masks don't work for viral respiratory
Correct.
infections in May of 2020. They
And
showed
the
all
reason
the
is that
data.
the randomized data was always negative.
Right,
It was
always.
negative before, it's negative now. And you know, I mean, nothing changed here.
I mean, okay, I don't know a fucking thing, but I know the size of a fucking virus.
Yeah.
It's less than the size of DNA.
Yeah.
How
How
about
the
regular
fuck
virus?
would a mask, which is essentially a weed, stop something like that?
So the argument is that it stops droplets, right?
Droplets, what
The
the
virus,
fuck?
the virus is like,
I know, no,
basically
droplet.
like a little tiny bit of water, right? So aerosols are a very, very tiny bit of water, droplets a little more, right? Okay, so it stops droplets. But it's spread by aerosols. And your glasses fog up. Everyone knows that it doesn't stop aerosols. Anyone's worn a mask knows it doesn't stop aerosols. So what were they doing?
I just want to go, it's not just common sense, it was factual data already
I know,
studied.
and there's a reason why
scientifically. It's
Fauci
not
went on
just
TV and
opinion.
said he didn't
It's
think it
not
worked.
opinion.
Well, we have to be honest, like what happened was, I think in the weeks of the end of March to early April, as Scott says, people wanted to feel like something was in our control.
Yeah.
And there was a concerted effort by a bunch of activists, some of whom were scientists, although they're not public health scientists, like Jeremy Howard, the computer scientist. They launched a petition that we need #masks4all. They pushed like, take your sock and cut it off and put it over your face, which we knew was ineffective. We had data that cloth masking was ineffective. Now we have much more data that's ineffective. They pushed that, and then it became something that they wanted people arrested for not doing it. Like we want to use the police state to enforce people doing something that doesn't work, which is totally mad. And then they want to, and of course, it's the thing that if you said anything about masking on social media, the posts are pulled, they're demonetized, they're stripped down. You could not question this.
By the way, that's what they did in the Bangladesh study. They used police to enforce the mask.
Can we talk about Bangladesh?
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Explain the last graph.
okay, so I would say that this is about, I wrote a piece in the Atlantic called "The Downsides of Masking Young Kids Are Real."
How
Okay,
on earth did you get that in the Atlantic?
I know, but in response to that, like
I know, you gotta.
hundreds of people canceled their Atlantic subscription.
Well done, Vinay, well done.
Yeah. So this was a paper that came out of Spain, and this is what it's showing. It's showing you the measured values of spread, the R coefficient, okay, of viral spread. And in Spain, they have a strict policy that if you're under the age of 6, you don't mask, and if you're above the age of 6, you do mask. And this is basically regression discontinuity. And so the question is, by having a mask policy that doesn't apply to 5-year-olds, but does apply to 6-year-olds, do you see a step in the graph? Do you see a change in slope? And I mean, it's a step, whatever. It's kids don't transmit, proving stuff. That kids, our coefficient is lower in kids than adults, and there's just nothing.
I just want to add one thing about this madness, which is still, I just went to visit someone at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore.
Yeah.
They make you wear a mask as soon as you enter the building.
What about you? What about you? See at my hospital? Yeah, but you just have to wear a mask if you have a cup of coffee. And if you have a cup of coffee in your hand, you don't have to do it.
Just wait to get an allergy shot. I was told I have to wear a mask. I looked around, nobody's wearing a mask. I said, thank you.
Is there evidence actually, there's a natural channel that's counterproductive, because if
Yes.
people feel safer with a mask,
Yeah.
it still spikes on the dashboard theory. If they feel
Correct.
safer with a mask, then they will go to bars with a mask on and
Correct.
actually get.
Well,
Is there evidence for
I
that,
think-
or is it just?
I just think that it was never properly studied. There's risk compensation of people who deny that it's possible, but I think it's still possible. It's possible that was the case. Yes.
But I think.
Nobody believes it works, so it doesn't.
But it's a very important point, though, when you're talking about people who actually have high risk to die from COVID in 2020. When Redfield, the head of the CDC, said this is better than a vaccine, this protected, we could end the pandemic, quote.
Yeah. If everyone gets
You're
COVID.
telling old people who are high risk, you're protected. That is not just scientifically invalid, that is dangerous. And that'll go down, it really is one
No,
of the
you're right.
historically most dangerous statements by a public health leader.
I'm getting more on the chat saying that we need to shut up and.
Okay, but they should have been here if they wanted to shut us.
Yeah. All right, let me make the point. So, we've had very few cluster randomized controlled trials of masking. There's 2, to my knowledge. This is the Guinea-Bissau study. This study was published eventually in Science. It's basically one point I'm gonna make. This is a randomized trial of villages in Bangladesh. They go to villages in Bangladesh, and there's a bunch of villages where they just go there and see who wants to sign up for the study. Anytime you feel sick with COVID-19 symptoms, you let us know, and then we'll later collect your blood and we'll look for antibodies that you've had COVID. So we're looking at symptomatic, you felt sick, and then seroprevalence, that in your blood you had COVID later. That's the primary endpoint of the study. Symptomatic SARS-CoV-2 infection, primary endpoint of the study. Okay, they go to villages where they don't do masking, villages where they give out cloth masks, villages where they give out surgical masks. The second thing they look at is they just swab people randomly. They look at how many people wear masks, and then they look at how many people report symptoms. This is an interesting one to me. This is not swab randomly. They draw blood randomly. They go back to the villages, and then they draw blood randomly from people in mask villages versus no mask villages. Now imagine by you wearing a mask, you are slightly less likely to call the hotline when you feel sick. There can be a selection bias because you're wearing a mask. It can be right, so this endpoint will overcome that because we go randomly pick people and we draw their blood. Okay, so the second endpoint. Here's what we find. The primary endpoint, this is what they say. The comparison villages had this, cloth mask, there's totally no effect, and surgical masks, they claim a benefit, 11%, p-value 0.043, barely significant. That's what they claim in their science paper. They say masking works. That's what, Abeluk says. This cloth mask failed here. This endpoint is still not reported. The random endpoint is not reported. The one endpoint that's actually not susceptible to bias, they've never reported this endpoint. This endpoint was how much they wore masks. It was actually piss poor, it's like 40%. And this endpoint, just how much symptoms you feel, I think is a useless endpoint because it's an open label study. It's totally subjective. This is interesting to me that they've never been asked to report the best endpoint of the study, the random collections. Okay, then the next thing I'll say is, Of course, we went crazy, but Palo Alto Public Schools outside, yes.
In that Bangladesh study, is it correct or not that they did not specify on their testing people who had masks on individuals?
Correct, they didn't.
They're only separated them if they had told their village
Correct,
to
it's
wear
cluster
masks. They
study.
have no data
Correct,
whatsoever
on
on
individual
who
usage.
actually wore masks.
Correct. The claim being tested is in villages where we told them to wear masks, did fewer people in those villages say they had COVID-19 later?
Or
But
did
that's
it,
the right study,
or
that's
did
the right way to do it.
Well, yeah,
because this is
yes,
very
I agree with
important.
you.
You can't assume everybody's wearing a mask.
Yeah.
The correct thing is to do
If
on the
you want
village.
to evaluate the effectiveness of a mask mandate, then
Of-
that's.
yes.
well,
Yeah.
But
that's the right
that's the point though, it doesn't allow you later to tell an old person this will protect you.
it
It
doesn't.
doesn't allow you to say that, that's
And-
right. It doesn't allow you to test the mask mandate question, you're right. Okay, but here's the thing about this paper.
No, it does. The problem is there's an endogeneity of getting around. In other words, the person who chooses to wear a mask is different than the
Yes.
person who doesn't. So you can't ask individuals.
Okay.
You have to do it as
Let me show you why this whole study's bunk. Okay,
Yeah.
this is the key reanalysis by Wes Pegden and Ben Reck. Okay, here's what they're doing. They're looking at, this is basically a distribution of, imagine we simulate this experiment, but under the null hypothesis that it doesn't do anything. Under how many simulations you get no difference in symptomatic, this is the primary endpoint of the study. How many difference in the symptoms that they report in the study and the consenting population size. Okay, let me explain. What they're saying here is, the primary endpoint of this study, if you simulate the experiment 1,000 times, saying masks don't do anything, the red line is the actual observed result. And what you see is that, yeah, could it happen under the null hypothesis? Yeah, but not super common, right? It's towards the side. I'll skip the middle one for now, because this is a stupid endpoint. This is just how many symptoms you report. The consenting population size. They went to villages that were matched by population. There should be no difference in the size, the number of people participating in masked villages versus no masked villages. It's a randomized study of matched villages. It should be the exact same consenting population size. But yet there's a huge difference. Masked villages have almost 10% more people signing up in those villages than no masked villages. And statistically, it's, P with so many zeros in it. It's so much more significant than the primary endpoint. Why do masked villages have so many more people signing up? The answer is when the researchers did the investigation, in the no mask village, they pull up in a Toyota Yaris with a clipboard. Who wants to sign up for my study? In the mask village, they pull up with a big truck with boxes in the back. Who wants to sign up for my study? And that's called concealment failure. They didn't conceal randomization from the participants. They get an 11th person participating for every 10 people in the control arm. And that means basically, who is this 11th person? A person who will only participate if they're getting a freebie and not if they're not. Are they equally likely to report their symptoms and get tested? And I would argue no, they don't really care, they just wanted the freebie. And so I think this whole study, there's so much bias into the sample size that it's not even randomized anymore. It's 11 versus 10. It's not a randomized study. There are extra people in the masked villages who are different types of people. And I suspect they're not likely to report their endpoint. And so the entire difference in the endpoint is explained by the fact that they're not really running a randomized trial. Jay?
Just one other thing about the statistics about this, if you
Yeah.
go back a couple, they use the, so here, okay, so symptomatic seroprevalence.
Yeah.
The seroprevalence studies always have false positive, false negative errors. Now you can say, okay, well, they randomized so that you had it in both arms, but that changes the standard errors. In fact, it increases the standard errors depending on the way that you evaluate the false positive, false negative rate. That's also dependent on doing, studies like tests.
Okay.
They don't account for that in their standard errors. So that P equals 0.04 or whatever they have. I mean, I don't think that's right.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
Like
okay.
they're not correct for that.
And that's also why when Wes Pegden realized his p-value gets his 0.11.
Yeah, with that non-parametric test,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
So in economics, we also often look not just at statistical
Yeah.
significance, but what we call economic significance.
Yes.
The absolute size of those numbers
It's
is
minuscule.
minuscule.
Minuscule. And it's a short-term study.
Two people
Yeah,
didn't get.
correct.
COVID.
Yeah, and short term. So with more time, they'll catch up. It'll all, all roads lead to
I
where
mean,
we
so
are.
like the argument that they make is that if you look at 60 or 50+ year olds or whatever, there was an effect.
It was only in the older group.
Yes, it was only in 50 plus. It was only in 50 plus. Yes,
Right,
okay.
and then
Yeah.
if you, because then it matters for them, of course, because they're more susceptible, but
Oh,
also.
and then Abel's quote where he says that if everyone did this forever, we'd say.
Yes,
a
so they
million
do this like,
lives.
they do this really dumb IV,
Yeah.
where they say,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
well, only 40% masked up. We have to multiply the effect size by 2.5 to actually understand what the effect would be had everybody masked up in that.
I know, but it's so silly because they show that even with the most draconian measures to encourage masking, nobody wanted to do it,
Yeah,
right? And so it's like, it's actually just
But
silly.
the thing, you're fine, your point, you said it a couple times, and I don't think
Yeah,
all roads lead to COVID.
all roads lead to COVID.
If,
Yeah.
if all you're doing, as long as the reproduction rate's above
Yes,
one,
yes.
the standard, we're all gonna get it eventually, so.
So you could argue
It really
there's
has
a,
to be about how much, what benefit is there from slowing it down a week?
if you shifted from pre-vaccine to post-vaccine, maybe you could argue that's the benefit, right? But once you're vaccinated, then there's no point. And then also pre-vaccine, post-vaccine, it matters if you're 90, but it doesn't matter if you're 20.
but even, I mean, just let's just keep going on this line, like, it's better to get when you're younger.
Yes, okay, of course, like, yeah, I mean, yeah, right. You want to keep kicking the can 10 years and wearing N95 for 10 years, you're not gonna be healthier in 10 years than you are today.
So guys, the effect is small, and the actual effect is 5 years from now, what fraction of people didn't get COVID? And that's gonna be like next month, or didn't die of COVID.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to show you one thing real quick before I show you my, we have a paper called CDC, Statistical and Numerical Errors made by the CDC.
Ooh,
And it was actually been banned from a preprint server, MedRxiv, for no, I'm gonna tell you about no reason, but these are some of the errors. One, COVID-19 is a top 5 cause of death in children of all age groups.
God, that was such a
Totally wrong. I mean, it was wrong in so many ways, but one was they used COVID-19 deaths for more than 2 years, comparing against annual deaths from other causes. They omit, I mean, so many errors. Okay, and then another one that I think is good, COVID-19 hospitalizations for children are increasing in the US, and at the time of the statement, it was already decreasing. I mean, just basic errors that we documented. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about first I'll talk about like the impacts on academic freedom. One, I was a keynote lecturer, scheduled to give the keynote at the American College of Pharmacy in Dallas. The keynote was gonna be on how often, when you prescribe medical drugs, as the population ages and changes and there's less smoking and more obesity, at what point do you say we need to run some new studies? Like, does aspirin, it used to work wonders when we smoked and were thin, and now it does not seem to work so much. So the topic was about, reappraising medical evidence. And this talk was canceled recently because of a Twitter outcry at the sponsors. And I just want to make one point. The organization is 20,000 people, and 200 people wanted it canceled. Okay, so they capitulated, they canceled the talk. But one thing to point out is people say, well, they call it the free market is deciding, but it's not really a free market. It's just 200 very loud people are dominating the views. We don't know what 20,000 people think. That's one. Two, of the 200 people, a third of them are members of the American College of Pharmacy. I'll grant that there's some people there who are still want to mask kids and still want to boost, toddlers or whatever. So they disagree with me. A third of them are people who always forget these kinds of things about cancellation. A third of them are people who they don't disagree with me about COVID-19 policy. They may even agree. They don't like my view about cancer drug policy from 5 years ago, or I might have, slighted them at a conference 4 years ago. Okay, they're really upset about it's totally a separate grievance, but they smell blood in the water and they can get a little revenge. And then the third group is, I think there's a group of people who just don't like to see anyone successful ever. And they're like, I really do. He's too young to be full professor. He's got too much praise. And so we want to cancel his talk. So when we allow these sort of online mobs to cancel lectures, we got the 3 groups of people: vocal minority doesn't like your view, people pre-existing grievance, and people who just don't like to see anyone succeed in life. They just want to tear people down. And so, why was my talk getting
Some people probably have more than one of those.
Now the preprint server is a big problem. In the beginning of the pandemic, they made these servers to host medical articles before they are vetted in peer review. MedRxiv is a preprint server where I think you posted Santa Clara. And then there's SSRN, which is run by Elsevier Saunders, the Lancet Journal. And over the course of the pandemic, we submitted like 20 papers to them. And this is the table of the papers. SSRN, mask mandates in COVID-19, a reanalysis of the Boston school study. We showed that mask mandates don't work in children. That paper was removed. Quote, given the need to be cautious about posting medical content, we are selective. And then here's a fun one. I wrote a paper on all the papers we submitted that were rejected from their server, and I tried to post it on their server. And they removed a comprehensive analysis of articles submitted to preprint servers from one laboratory. They removed it, saying, given the need to be cautious, they don't even let me post that they're doing a bad job. Falsification endpoints and the pitfalls of using observational studies in COVID-19 vaccine effectiveness of children, removed, given the need to be cautious. Interpretation of wide confidence intervals. So this is something about, they say that, Scott says masks don't work by the evidence. they say that actually the confidence interval is very wide. So you're supposed to say, like, it could still work. And then we went through all the other Cochrane reviews where the confidence interval was wide, and we showed every one of the other ones, they say, this don't work, this don't work, this don't work, this don't work. But then for mass, they say, but it could be very wide, so it might work. So we wrote a paper on that, and they removed that, given the need to be cautious. And then my COVID-19 vaccines history paper, they removed this. The removed papers I post on other preprint servers, where they're typically in the top 1% of articles ever been posted. Like, they're incredibly popular. MedRxiv removed that, and they removed statistical and numerical errors made by the CDC. They said it was not a systematic evaluation. So what's my point here? These preprint servers are not meant to, they're not meant to remove content that they disagree with. It's not a journal. They just merely need to make sure that, this is not like, I'm not just putting up, spam on their server. They're violating their own rule, always with an ideological bent, always to support the establishment view. And so it is a very perverse form of censorship, and I think extremely dangerous. And I've been talking with some donors about creating a truly new preprint server that doesn't censor. I think we're going to do that in the next year. Smearing on Wikipedia. I think we have to be honest about Wikipedia. Wikipedia has no balance on political issues. It is extremely far left. And unfortunately, COVID-19 policy, in many ways, Scott was the one who wanted kids in school and not to mask children. Those should have been progressive values. Actually, progressives should have been the ones to say, of course, but of course.
Black lives matter unless they happen to be in school.
Right.
Yeah, because rich white people can afford.
Yeah, of course, we know why, which white teachers are teaching in those schools.
Yeah, so the teachers unions went against, I think, and so smearing on Wikipedia.
No, well, they still have the Black Lives Matter poster in their yard, so they're protected.
My own Wikipedia page has been smeared by this person, Alex Brown. Alex Brown is, in Wikipedia, there's a few people who are like super contributors, and they have like all this power to control the page because they know the stupid rules of Wikipedia. And this person, anytime someone says anything nice about me, he deletes it and he replaces it with something negative. He mischaracterizes my positions. And Alex Brown has done that for other people. Someone wrote a whole article called How Wikipedia Defames and Delegitimizes Anyone Raising Concerns Against WHO Narrative on COVID. Alex Brown. He is a computer programmer and PhD in English. He spends all time on Wikipedia. I don't have time to go on Wikipedia. He spends all his time on my page blocking anyone from editing it, creating his own narrative. The Great Barrington Declaration.
Exactly happened.
And same with
My
Scott.
page, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I had people that were also Wikipedia editors trying to fix the errors and the libel, basically.
But you can't fix
And
it.
they finally locked it, and they said, no, nobody's gonna touch it.
I see. But in Scott's case, it has an open. Scott Atlas, dangerous purveyor of misinformation. Then, it opens with like ridiculous editorializing.
The Chief Preprint Declaration page.
Yeah.
Focus protection is a fringe position.
Fringe position. So which, to me, how can you call something fringe when you've never surveyed anyone? You have 16, how many signatures do you have ultimately?
I mean, almost
40,000?
a million people. Almost a million people.
A million people signed it.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
You have tens of thousands of documents.
it's easy to call something fringe, but they never quantify who had what view. I suspect your view is probably more popular even in the moment.
But it's worse than that, and no, I'm not gonna shut up. The reality is that it's not about it being fringed by the number of people who agree. It's scientifically valid.
Okay, that's true.
Okay,
That's
the earth is round, targeted protection should have been done. It's not by survey numbers. It's really not, science is not done by survey, as Johnny and Edie said. So yes, it's not fringe, but it's also correct.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that.
That's a bigger point.
Views, you happen to.
So I see, I think,
But, heliocentrism was once fringe.
Yeah, so I mean,
Right.
two definitions.
I'm
One
saying
is-
there's two
yeah,
issues.
Yeah, two, right. Are you correct? You're always correct. Two, were you the minority or majority? I don't know the answer. I suspect you were the majority though. You were correct and the majority, I think, in my views.
but you see, I think where we really have to think about as a university and what we want to do about this.
Yeah. Wait, let me get,
Fundamentally, you don't know what is correct and what is incorrect. It's irrelevant to the discussion. You do not shut down somebody, even if you think they're completely incorrect. That's antithetical to what we stand.
and more than
And
that,
that's the fucking lesson
more
that
than that,
comes out of this.
Stanford should have had a debate. Because, and the debate should have been, broadcast his opinion to more people and let anyone try to compete
And
with
of
it.
course,
They didn't want to do it.
but you know why?
They're scared of the donors.
No, because doctors lie to patients.
They do that too.
And that's ubiquitous. And so the first thing you've got to start is that in medicine, stop lying to patients. Treat them as adults. If the child, if smoking is going to kill you, but it's not going to kill you tomorrow. Stop telling us it's going to kill them tomorrow.
I think I agree with that point, but I think some people just don't know better. But okay, let me make a few more points. One,
Yes.
scientists attack. There are a number of articles now like this in Nature. Oh, I hope you die. How COVID-19 pandemic unleashed attacks on scientists. And the point I want to make here is if you read all the scientists who were attacked, it's always stories of the scientist who was pro-masking and then the fringe person who attacked them. The scientist who was pro-lockdowns and the public who attacked them. There's no stories about how they attacked Scott. There's no stories about how they attacked Jay. Because if your point of view was not the establishment narrative, they don't even consider you a scientist who was attacked. You know, you were attacked viciously. You're still attacked.
I know.
But you're not in this feature. It's a double standard. You can only be attacked if you held the view that they left.
Did somebody like object, point that out, they didn't do the full sample?
No, I mean, I think that these science and nature are just so biased. Particularly science with Holden.
I mean, I got death threats for 2 years.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
I'm sure he wasn't too.
So I don't tell the address of where I'm giving the talk until. Okay, Facebook third-party fact checkers. We have a paper on this you might like. These Facebook fact checkers are the ones who say, it says, you know, Scott Atlas says there's no evidence supports masking children. You said something like that, which is true. True then, true now. And then it says fact check. This is false. Labeled on your thing, right? Something like that. And then we went through who are the people who do that. They've always had these fact checking services on Facebook, these third-party services. Pre-pandemic, pre-pandemic's on the right, post-pandemic's on this. Something happens from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. The fact checkers go from, 1,000 followers on Twitter to 10,000 followers on Twitter. They're much more active on Twitter. They're much more like they have Twitter accounts. And in one case, there was one person who had already been critical of the paper on Twitter who was asked to be a fact checker. Basically, what's going on here is that the fact checking service, they get a fact they don't like. Then they think, who can I have review this fact? They go look on Twitter and they find someone who disagrees and they make that person the fact checker, when they've already stated disagreement, or they find someone whose views are already known. It's the most biased thing on the planet. You're not getting a neutral person to fact check. You're literally getting somebody to tell you what you want to hear. And that's their method. So I say Facebook a worthy judge of medical misinformation. This is the same company that did not allow you to talk about lab leak for 6 months. That it was even possible.
So this is when Marty was still that page today editor.
Yes.
He said,
Well, that's another thing. Marty and I, we were both pushed out of that.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is the one thing that I'm curious what people think. Jay and I saw this paper came out. This was in JAMA Network Open.
oh dear God, this thing.
Okay, communication of COVID-19 misinformation on social media. Okay, they're saying doctors on social media put out misinformation. This is JAMA. And then I see here, there's one hemonc doctor that did it. I said, that's a little odd. And then I see it, quote, if we drop mask mandates too soon, the pandemic will take the exact same trajectory as it otherwise would. Okay, the first time they dated that 2021, I actually said that in 2022. This is my tweet. They're labeling, and then Fauci says, quote, mask initiatives may have had a small impact. Even Fauci's finally gotten around to admit it, that it didn't do anything. But here's my question. You get a real publication labeling my statement, which is 100% accurate, that dropping mask mandates in 2022 didn't do anything. It's not going to help anything. And they're labeling it misinformation. They're putting it on little pages. And it's identifiable.
The criteria was that you contradict the CDC.
Yeah, contradict CDC.
Yeah, that's it.
What's the criteria?
Contradict CDC.
That's misinformation.
But I think, what does it say? But they're basically, it's quite a label to claim that I'm promoting misinformation. It is libel.
It's defamatory. It's defamatory.
It's
Well,
defamatory.
once you find disagreeing with the CDC is misinformation, guilty.
Yes. I think that's a huge problem. And then finally, passive acting freedom. I think, there are no debates on lockdown, school closure, masking, vaccine policy, viruses, etc. I think I'm most worried about passive academic freedom. These institutions fail miserably to have any debates on any of these topics. We still have a mandatory masking policy in the hospital I work in. We've never had a discussion about that policy. It's just continuing in perpetuity. Like you say, Hopkins is in perpetuity.
Did you see us after the grand rounds finally? I thought I saw that they did that.
I'm going to do a debate in my department, epidemiology, on December 7th.
December 7th.
Yeah.
3.5 years fucking after the
So
start.
you see that you still have to wear masks?
Only in the San Francisco General Hospital. And I think at Maine UCSF, not right now, no. But Stanford, they just went back to it. They had some, I saw that.
All right, Dave Henderson online wants to ask a question. Dave, go for it.
Thanks very much, John, and thanks Thanks. This is a great lecture. You showed so many things so fast in the last minute. Something that lists off various doctors. Could you go back to that just a second? It was like a column and there was like one of each. What, it went so fast. What was your point there, that they aren't even experts or what?
No, that a third party group of people are deciding which doctors spread misinformation. I looked in their paper and I saw that there was one hem-onc doctor, which is my specialty, and I wondered who it might be. And then later, lo and behold, I found out it was me.
Okay. Okay. Thanks very much.
But by the way, the first two authors are undergrads.
Yeah, and also you see this thing called view correction. I had my people pull every quote. Every quote is misquoted. Every quote, the data, not every quote. Many of the quotes are misquoted. Many of the quotes, the data are wrong. The data is riddled with errors. We submitted a big list of errors. Jam was having one correction. They've only showed a portion of the data. I bet if you pull the data for this, I'll just say, I don't know what you're going to find if you pull the data. There's lots of errors in this paper. Now the correction brings me joy to see.
But let me ask you a question first. You've done with these two. Doesn't this impact your career when you have to write for grants and stuff? How is this going to happen?
So one piece of data that doesn't fit the narrative is that during all of this, I did get promoted. A decision approved, full professor.
Yay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that surprised me. So there's now the question about grants.
Yeah.
Your outside job opportunities may be good.
Well, one thing is there are a lot of people who feel, obviously, who agree with these points of views. And so there are a lot of individual donors who want to support some of this kind of work. So we've had a lot of interest in that way too. Yeah, I'm sure it affects my ability to get NIH grants. And they canceled my keynote, so that, there's some professional repercussions. But no one has been braver than these two gentlemen who've been really outspoken. And I guess at some point in life, you just have to say what you think is true and damn the consequences.
Are you allowed by your institution to approach those private donors?
That's a good question. They approach me, but I don't know the university policy on that. Actually,
And if they do give you money, but is it you or the
universities?
It's the university
Yeah,
gets money.
for grant money.
And they basically own the money.
Yeah, when they take their hefty tax off the top for
And the tax may be 100%.
they take some ridiculous tax they like to take. You know how they are. Did it affect my career? I don't know. I think I'm curious, what you all feel, how you feel, but I don't know. In many ways, I feel like Jay's come out way ahead, in my opinion, because he was right on so many things, and he's been vindicated every day, and Scott as well. Like, I think the ultimate test of his history.
It's interesting. I don't want to, I lost my cool in a subcommittee meeting in the Senate, where one of your colleagues, the question on the table was, the subcommittee meeting of academic freedom. Give me an example where somebody's academic freedom was a good table. So I said, okay, let's talk about Scott Adams. And then, she said to me, he killed 1 million people. How can these people still, in the face of the evidence, hang on to these? Isn't there somebody in these medical communities saying, Florida, California, look at the fucking rates?
It's a bubble.
Yeah.
It's a bubble. Like they don't have any capacity to let outside voices in. That's why these debates. I'm really surprised. I'm really glad that you're going to get to do this debate in December.
Eventually, the truth will prevail, in my opinion. But there's one point to Jay's point. There's the National Academies of Medicine, like a very prestigious organization. They're giving out lifetime achievement awards. Like all the people who commented on COVID who are winning the awards were the people wrong about everything. They were wrong about lockdowns, wrong about masking, wrong about vaccines, wrong about vaccine mandates. They were wrong about every single major policy issue. They're winning all the lifetime achievement awards.
If you look at the National Portrait Gallery, the first thing you see is a portrait of Fauci.
Oh, God. And then they took his mask and they put it in the Smithsonian. And the mask he wore it through the wall out.
I just want, can I just add something to what was said? I think that there's a Kafka-esque nature to the discussion. The woman who's a freak at the Stanford Faculty Senate, who said that statement, these people don't understand. The lockdowners got what they wanted. There is no space between what Fauci and Birx said and what was done under the Trump and Biden administrations. They got what they wanted. So if the results are good, they got what they wanted, they should be congratulated. If 1 million people died, they got what they wanted. Their guidance is to blame.
Yeah. And then
People who spoke counter to what was implemented do not have responsibility
I agree.
for what was implemented.
No, it's supposed to, you were so.
And then Jay has an interesting tweet recently. Somebody told Jay, somebody said, because of people like you, lockdown wasn't successful because you were critical of us. And then his point was, if lockdown is so vulnerable to one fringe epidemiologist saying, hey, that's not a good idea, it's not a very good strategy, is it? That one person could, and what it tells you is that, of course, there's somebody's, anytime you have unprecedented policies, somebody's going to disagree.
We've got questions from
Yes.
online.
Okay, two in the back, and then you want.
Oh,
Okay. Okay.
It takes months.
Go, Beth. Unmute yourself.
Actually, I know, my questions are the ones that are online. So I'm wondering whether some of the problem with mask discussion has to do with public health versus individual health questions that we're not being clear enough about, because it's my understanding that if you're like a high risk person, my friend who had a lung transplant, it helps him to wear an N95 in a crowded room, even if no one else is masked. And it's my understanding that if you have COVID or the flu or a cold and you wear a surgical mask in a crowded room, you are helping the people around you. So are those not true? And B, would it help us to not have mask fights if you were more clear that that masks don't work like in a mass public health sense?
Great question. And you might get a range of opinions from this room, but I would say let's do the second one first. I think if you have COVID and if you have the flu, and if you wear a surgical mask, I think you're providing essentially no protection to anyone around you. Like it's going to be, if you're in a prolonged route, if you go on an airplane, I know some people like, I have COVID, I'm gonna put a surgical mask and go take this flight anyway. You're still breathing out COVID to everybody. It's gonna be, mixed pretty quickly and you're gonna breathe it out in the lobbies, et cetera. Now the N95 one I think is a tough question because the way N95s have been validated is if you wear it and if you get fit tested, meaning they put like a chemical perfume in the air, a scent, and then you, while wearing it, cannot smell the scent, proving that it's fitting your face tightly. Under those circumstances, if you wear it for like less than 15 minutes when you go in a room, I think it has a very plausible reason that it'll keep the air from reaching your nose for 15 minutes. But when you start telling people like bone marrow transplant patients to wear it, and we're talking about wearing it for 6 hours or 5 hours or 4 hours, you start to worry that no one can sustain this. A fitted N95 mask is very unpleasant to wear. I cannot wear it for more, I had to wear it for bone marrow procedures. That takes like 20 minutes. And by the end of it, my nose feels like gonna break. And then finally, I just say that one could have done that study. They didn't do this study, which is just to focus on very vulnerable people and advise them to do this or not, and then see if they're less likely to get the COVID-19. One last point, and then let's see what Scott thinks. The last point I make is, I separate immunocompromised people into two buckets: transiently immunocompromised and permanently immunocompromised. And if you're transiently immunocompromised, then I think it's more reasonable to say, okay, in the next month, I'm going to stay in my house because I just had a bone marrow transplant, but then I'm going to get better and, I can go back out there. If you're permanently immunocompromised, you have diabetes or, whatever, I think you have to make a choice, which is you're going to get COVID eventually anyway. And so how do you want to live the rest of your life? So I'm a little bit, certainly the second one I'm very skeptical of. The first one I think has more plausibility. Scott, what do you think?
Well, if you just look at the data, which is how the discussion should be and not really opinion. When you look at the Cochrane study, which is a review of all the sound scientific data, it's not a study in and of itself, it's a review of all the studies.
Sure.
And they carefully analyzed it. And the bottom line of the lead scientist who wrote the paper in the Cochrane review is there is no evidence that masks work. There is no evidence that N95 masks work.
And
those are the 2 points of his study.
So Scott is making the point about Cochrane.
Yeah. The one other thing I want to say is that Dr. Fauci says, well, but it might work in individuals, which is sort of the genesis of this question. Right? There is no such science as that. The science is the randomized clinical trial. You can always say that something might work in an individual person. There's no way to test that unless you test every individual person. So science is done the way these randomized controlled trials are done. And the bottom line, masks do not work. That is the data.
And then one more point is that there is a nice Annals of Internal Medicine study randomizing healthcare professionals, who presumably are exposed more than the average person, to surgical or N95, and there's no difference in acquisition. So, I guess there's under the real world utilization, this is the Canadian study.
That's in the Cochrane review.
That's in the Cochrane review, yeah, it's in the section. but it's healthcare providers and not, yes.
Questions?
I have one thing that's a slight generalization, which is there's a Supreme Court case coming up
Yes.
because of the Texas and Florida laws, which are meant to stop what happens to us. There's a serious question of whether the Supreme Court will throw it out because of First Amendment protections for like Facebook. But it feels like one of the lessons from your talk is that even if we stop the really big guys from doing what they did to us, then you can't stop like, SSRN. Like the Texas law doesn't affect SSRN, and so that the censorship and the sort of abuse of science that's happened, was abetted by the big social media companies. But if we address the social media companies, we're not going to really make sure this doesn't happen again, right?
I think you're right.
That we need to find alternative
The root
ways
of,
to communicate.
the root
on
of
the internet.
censorship is a mental virus that's spreading in society, where if you hear something that you don't agree with, it is harming you to hear it, and you cannot deal with it. And that's an extremely popular view among these young people on campus. They don't want to hear anything they don't agree with right away. And it's corrosive. And that's behind SSRN, behind Facebook. They think that if Jay is allowed to say what he thinks, it will cause harm. They can't entertain the possibility that he might be right, we might be right. We don't know who's right. That's one possibility. And turn out he's right, So I think it's extremely
You
problematic.
see, I think we should at this point give up. There's always going to be this shit on the internet.
There's always been
We
shit.
happen to be a
Let it be
Stanford
free.
University, and a Stanford University, we could say, in this institution, we're going to put in place a set of rules and a thing where people get to argue what they want and they're not attacked for it.
Yeah.
And this has happened in the past, and we should be embarrassed about it, and we should do something, use those as exemplars to not have it happen again. That's what I think we should do.
If I could say just a short opinion, which is that to me, there's only one solution to misinformation, and that is more information, because there is no one that knows what truth is and what truth isn't. And I think you have to, we're a free society, you have to trust people, you have to be able to function, you're not a rock or a plant, you're supposed to be able to reason. And given the flaws of human beings who are in charge of information, if there is such a thing, you just have to have more information. I mean, I think that's what Sweden did in their thing. They trusted people to make rational decisions. They gave them information. They said it was dangerous to go into large crowded places if you're old. And basically people are able to function. And I just don't see anyone or any law where there's censorship involved to be trustworthy.
I think we in this room all agree about that. The problem is a spreading institutionalized censorship. First, everything becomes political, and then it's not just Twitter mobs, it's institutional review boards, university bureaucracies, and now scientific societies, journals, social media companies, and the government, as Missouri v. Biden showed us, or institutionally censoring all sorts of stuff. And that, so our views on free speech are great, but institutionalized censorship in all of the bedrock institutions of science and academia now spreading to the government is
Just climate change. You cannot make a logical argument about climate change. If you say something like I would say, how could it be the world supply of water is fixed? Actually, I was wrong about that, but let's assume I was right. The world supply of water is fixed. How could the temperature affect the total number of droughts? It's impossible. Oh, you're a climate.
let's not go to climate.
I'm just saying it's completely ubiquitous.
The censorship.
But I mean, I think I agree with both Scott and John's point, which is one, that, you can't do it. Like, you have to have free exchange of ideas. And two, John's point, we're losing the institutions. It's scary.
Right.
I don't think I'd lose it in my lifetime. Yes.
I actually was involved in one little incident in this war. I wanted to write a piece about human challenge trials with COVID and how that would accelerate the approval process.
Yeah, you support that.
And I got hammered and told that I was not qualified to talk about exposing young people to a deadly virus. This was in spring 2021, when I think it was a year after we learned that It was not.
Not so bad for young people, yeah.
For those people. But this is what happens when you try to introduce a somewhat, I get, within the medical profession, they don't like human challenge. I understand it, that's the doctors. I mean, because of the history and all that, but just trying to talk about the statistical properties of human challenge trials for COVID, where young people are not gonna be, it's not affected. That is hammered.
Yeah,
And
I
so
think we should have done more human challenge trials, and I think that's just another example of a view that people think is unpopular, and not allowed to say it.
Yes,
Let's
Give
see,
you the last couple minutes and
leave it if you permitted to do the question. Yeah. Any other questions online? Put in the chat. Some comments from back of the room. You wanted to say something in the back? Say.
I had a follow-on comment.
Yeah.
On the National Portrait Gallery. I actually was hospitalized in your hospital following the vaccine. I got an MRI. Immediately welcome us all Dr. Kachi's cardboard cutout for a welcome to the hospital. Yeah, I thought about that. I'm like, there had to be a photograph taken. It had to be photoshopped. Had to be sent to the printer.
Yeah,
The printer
made life size.
distributed throughout the nation.
all right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been
Thanks for
a
having me.
Great talk.
There.
Hi, everybody.